one of my best friends who was also in the military, a warrior, and he just always constantly stayed on me. He's like, "Hey man, you're screwed up. You need to get help." I'm like, everybody I know is like me. And he's like, "Well, you're all screwed up." It's just like,
Right.
you're not screwed up, but you need some training, man. Like you got hey, there's stuff that we can do. And he was speaking from experience because in 2005, he got clipped in the head with a bullet.
Excited to be joined by Tom Spooner, former Special Forces Delta operator and Warrior's Heart co-founder. And thank you for jumping on. It's a real honor to speak with you, Tom.
Absolutely, Jason. And thanks for having me, man. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into Warrior's Heart. Tell people a little bit about it and what you're doing with veterans. I mean, we're talking PTSD, addiction issues, so much that when our fine soldiers come home that these are things that are not being addressed the way they should.
Right. So absolutely agree. So Warrior's Heart, we've been open since April of 2016. So right at almost 6 years that we've had the doors open, and we've had almost 1,700 warriors come through in that time. So, and that defined like the population that we serve is active duty, military, retired military, and active and retired law enforcement, firefighters, basically anybody that faces life and death as a profession on a daily basis, is who's qualified to come there. And so it's a 543 acre ranch in Bandera, Texas, which is about an hour northwest of San Antonio, where a primary chemical dependency, substance use disorder facility, but also co-occurring conditions, which we know is PTSD, mild TBI, moral grief injury, and the whole alphabet soup that the doctors give us when we come, So, and it's a 42-day inpatient treatment.
Tell me a little bit more about TBI.
Oh, yeah, man. It's so TBI is traumatic brain injury. So it was one of the signature injuries of, say, from 2001 to 2012, where a lot of guys, a lot of IEDs, a lot of roadside bombs, that was a very big tool that was used. And so, so where it goes back to is the veteran suicide rate, of 20 to 22 a day, depending on who you ask. And there's three main factors with that, and it'll get into the TBI piece of it. Okay. Is one of them is the chemical dependency piece. The other is post-traumatic stress and everything related to that. And the third one is undiagnosed and untreated traumatic brain injury, which I'm like the poster boy for all of that stuff, because I got the hat trick, as far as I got the PTS, I got the chemical dependency, and then I got 2006, I had a mortar round explode to me, 82 millimeter mortar round blew up about, 20 feet from where I was. So I got a traumatic brain injury. And to your question of, hey, what is that? There's varying degrees of it. A very big one that is noticeable to all, where, hey, you can't really function cognitively. You can't really move around. So it's basically brain damage, what has happened. And then when you get to the other end of the spectrum where it's mild and that kind of piece, it's really affects executive functioning and decision making. So, whenever you have some problems going on, and if it's PTS going on or you're using chemicals, self-medicating, you can see how that can go sideways, because we know all those things, don't allow you to make the best decisions anyway. And then when, your thinker's messed up, it just gets bad quick.
Is there, from all the work you've been doing and in your own personal injury, suffering, I don't even know how to categorize it. Do do you understand what parts of the brain that it's affecting? I mean, we've talked a lot about chemical addiction and recovery myself, knowing, the effects on the hippocampus and all these important parts of our brain, that the stress the brain is under with the overloads of cortisol and everything that soldiers are enduring when they're in the field, constant fight or flight mode and everything else. So with TBI, is it showing that it's even harder to deal with those things? Like you said, normally a hat trick we want to celebrate, but this isn't one we want to celebrate, Tom.
No, it's it's not one to celebrate. Well earned, like any other hat trick, but it's a lot more different circumstances. But a big thing, like what you were saying with the traumatic brain injury, is the first part of it is getting the diagnosis, because they'll say, and it's very accurate, hey, you've got symptoms of post-traumatic stress or any just kind of stress going on. And then the symptoms of traumatic brain injury, there's a part where they overlap, where the symptoms are kind of the same, where it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg. Is like, we always know that high emotions, intrude on cognitive abilities, right? Like, don't make an emotional decision just on, everybody knows that. So, or is it like in my case, which was a big part of it, it was the lack of my cognitive ability that brought on all the emotion. An example for that would be, I would get lost driving home. Yeah. Like, hey, when I say lost, like I knew where I was. I was, driving in the lane, nothing dangerous, but I was like, man, I don't recognize this. And I'd driven the same route for 10 years. So it's not, so these different things would come up and it would be like, man, I know I'm supposed to know this, but I can't recall it, which would increase my anxiety level, obviously, because it's like, wow, man, this is a big deal. So, and then we know once your emotions start getting up there, that affects your cognitive ability. So it's just this little bit of a vicious cycle. So it comes back down to the, just like with anything, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, is that as best as you can, an accurate diagnosis of what's going on. And specifically with the TBI, they have a lot of very specific testing that can be done, to see what part of your brain's like. For me, in 2010, when I was worse off, 2010, 2011, I was operating at 50% brain capacity, like processing speed, and 50% of my verbal memory was all that I was getting. So you can just see where the frustration would come from that. So.
And just in sharing that, Tom, we had, near the beginning of Knockin Doorz Down, one of my friends who was in the Marine Corps, who suffers from PTSD, and he talked about driving home one night, and his wife was like, "Are you okay?" And he didn't realize he was driving down the middle of the two lanes, because that's what they had to do in Iraq to avoid the landmines and everything else. And, just how that part of the brain, that fight or flight, this is what my safety factor is, and using so much capacity of your brain just to stay alive and keep your fellow soldiers alive, that it's almost like the brain has gone there and it just is sitting there. Would you say that's kind of some of the things that was for you or other people that have come through the doors?
Absolutely. And it's so it's a lot of it. Some guys are on deployment for a year long, so there's the normal human reaction of like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time, so I got to work myself, when you're changing a habit, right?
Yeah.
So then the other piece of it is that I've personally experienced and found with all the guys and gals that we work with, is that they call it post-traumatic stress, and okay, that's accurate, but also really it is, as it relates to any kind of trauma or stress that you've experienced, is have I processed it? Have I processed the emotional piece of it? Have I come to terms with it? Have I accepted it? Because some people don't, like you and I could be in the exact same event, and let's say in a wartime event, and this traumatic event happens, then we can you might be absolutely okay and like, wow, you just kind of process it. Next thing you know, it's something that jams me up, and I kind of need a professional, to kind of walk me through it. And a lot of that goes back to how we were raised, where we come from, core beliefs, all that kind of stuff, But it's, to your example, like what you said, is, to me, that's a perfect example of like, well, there's some unprocessed trauma that's there potentially, and maybe it's just part of the process of like, oh wow, let me realize where I am. Be very present.
No wonder so many of our veterans returning, or as you said, firefighters, police officers, EMT, fall to substance abuse. I know for me, it was unresolved trauma. And I was looking for an escape to avoid anything from those feelings that I was feeling that I did not have the capacity. There was no way.
Exactly. And you nailed it whenever, like you said, the first getting sober and, it's like, in this environment, we were untrained, sure. We didn't have tools in the toolbox to how do I process a traumatic event? How do I deal with feelings of shame, guilt, remorse, restless, irritable, discontent? Like same as you, I was in the same boat. It's like, hey, I didn't, and again, not blaming anyone. That was just, how we came up. That was how they came up. And so that's why in recovery, getting those tools, like how do I handle these feelings that I'm having? I had to be taught that. I had to learn tactics and techniques, and so those same training principles, is what generally applies to all the stuff, whatever is trauma, whether it's childhood trauma or whether it's wartime trauma. There's some different approaches there's some things that are different in the approach to that healing. And what I mean by that is whenever it comes to, say, we'll call it post-traumatic stress or unprocessed trauma. In that trauma, I was either one of two things. I was either a victim or a volunteer. And what I mean by that is, a good one for me is like all my childhood stuff. Okay, I was a victim to that, right? I didn't have any say, whatever. But then all the time, whenever I was in the military, you know what I mean? I volunteered to place myself in those positions where that trauma occurred, whether it was a mass casualty event, whatever the event was. So even though principally, I need tools, tactics, and techniques and training in how to process and continue on, and live with all that stuff. But if you approached me as a victim, I wouldn't be having it, wouldn't be the right approach. But if you approached me as a volunteer, like, hey man, you made a decision to put yourself in this situation where it could occur. That's where it kind of, the stigmas with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury and, and all that stuff, there actually should be an award for it, right? because really what it means is that like, wow, man, you volunteered to put yourself in a position that other people either could not or would not do that for the benefit of others. And therefore, hey man, you got a lot of trauma. Like that, it should be like, congratulations, you. Now with that, it's like, hey, we need some more training and we need some tools, and because there always will be a stigma, right, of the tough guy approach, the old guard, all that, and that's okay. I mean, at one time I was one of those guys. I get it. I don't judge, but what we're changing the narrative is and it's one of the mottos at Warriors Heart, and that's strength through healing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, by addressing what I have going on, it makes me stronger. I was already a good soldier, a really good soldier for the first 2 years I was in the Army, but then I was a raging functional alcoholic, So, but once I got sober and I was still in the Army, then man, then I was able to take it to all the levels that I could, because I was operating with everything that I had, versus being, chained down by self-medication or whatever else, Yeah.
Well, let's jump back. I know you mentioned childhood and maybe just in the broad scope of it, but What was Tom Spooner like growing up, home life? What really led you, in the military, but what was growing up like as well?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town in South Florida called Belglade, Florida. Pretty rough spot. But it was always had really good, strong family. I come from an alcoholic home. You know what I mean? Again, it was that in the South, in the country. You know what I mean? It was just kind of what it was. And it's, like you had mentioned before, I hold no resentment and connection with what happened. You know what I mean? It's but I came up in a small town, and pretty much in that small town, like the only ways out were military or professional sports, and obviously I didn't make it in professional. So it's, but my motivations were there, and I struggled with alcohol at an early age, and then throughout, like we had talked about, it's just I didn't have the tools to handle emotions, and I had a really, there was horrible times with alcohol, but I'd be lying if I didn't say like, hey man, it was good for a while.
Yeah,
honest.
Tom, we've had many celebrities, like Charlie Sheen included, and he was like, hey, there was a lot of fun that was had until it wasn't fun.
Exactly. So that my motivation, so that's kind of what the overall what was going on briefly. And then, but my motivators for joining the military was, I had my grandfather that I was really, really tight with. Well, both of them, but one that I was really tight. He was a World War II veteran. Oh. And so there was that piece. And then another really mentor, close person in my life was my uncle. And he was a 3-tour Vietnam vet. So, I had those people in my life. And so I just always wanted to join the military. That was kind of it. That was my motivation. Number one, I always wanted to do it. And whenever I was 20, I did it. I pretended to go to college for a year and a half, got some credit somehow. It was basically a 364 day a year drunk. Yeah, not proud of it, but that's what happened. And I was steadily going downhill, and I was like, man, I've got to get off of probation early. You know what I mean? And I'd already I was in ROTC, and so I was already going to be in the military path, but it was like, hey, I just walked in the recruiter, and I'm like, hey man, I've already, like, you don't need to sell me on anything, just get me out of here, like, because I'd already knew I was going down. So that's really was my motivation to come in. And I came in 1990. And that was whenever I was at basic training, that's when the Gulf War kicked off.
Right. So you went right into it.
I did, man. I went from basic training, I'd already been to Airborne school. So I went from basic training to Fort Bragg and right into the 82nd. And within 2 months after graduating, I was in Saudi Arabia, and then in Iraq, straight from the street right into combat, so it was a very, hey, welcome.
Yeah.
And it set the tone for the rest of my career, and how I wanted to be a soldier and stuff.
That's a funny thing. And I'm pretty sure I'd have to confirm with them. I believe it was late 60s, early 70s. My uncle was in the 82nd. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, I know that one. I got a shirt. I bought the logo shirt. So I'm pretty sure it's the 82nd. I'm having a little bit of brain fog on that one myself. What was interesting you threw in there, Tom, was that, that attempt, quote unquote, with college, but did you recognize it that early, 20 years old? Hey, this alcohol thing is a problem. The solution I see is getting into the service to stop.
Man, I knew. Like, because like we always talk about, not every time did I drink, I did screwed up stuff, but every time I did screwed up stuff, I had been drinking.
Familiar.
Yeah. So it was. I was still doing okay, but I started getting in trouble with the law. Just nothing horrible, but just being drunk and I fought a lot. And it was just like, man. This is just not gonna, like, I really need to get into what I need to do, but not, I was one of those guys, man. I ended up getting sober when I was 22 years old. So in 1992, so I was young, but it was, I was a mess. Professionally, I was, built for the military and like was crushing it. I did a lot in the first 2 years, but then my personal life, I got married and then, we got separated. It was just, I was just, it was horrible, So I knew there was always drinking was an issue, and any problems or issues that I had in my life came as a result of that. But man, I just didn't want to stop because I didn't have an alternative, like what you had said. I thought this is just the way it was, man. Like I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 22. Like that was just, I didn't know about AA. I didn't know sobriety. I didn't know any of this stuff that was out there,
Thank goodness for technology, so we can have this conversation in different states. But there's through voices like yourself and so many other that at least it's becoming more aware that help is there.
Yes.
Hopefully we can shed that stigma, like you said. What was the slogan there at Warrior's Heart?
Strength through healing.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's the truth. It's just not. It's, it's just not like, cool saying kind of thing, man. But you and I both know that, like, yeah, man, through the healing, whatever that was, whether it was spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, but through healing that's how I get stronger.
Well, what for you, I know you mentioned the brain injury you sustained while in service, but what were some of the, want to be respectful if it's not an area you want to talk about but some of the other things that you struggled when, hey, it was time to come home and process some things? Yeah,
so I got multiple stories for that because,
okay.
I have the story of, I came in 1990 in the 82nd as a active alcoholic. I did that for my first 2 years in the Army. But I mean, like I said, professionally, I was highly, highly functional. I had been to Ranger School. I'd been to Jump Master School. I got promoted to E5. Like I was a golden boy rock star. But then, like I said, the things that I loved in my life, like my wife, I just killed it. So short version is, got involved in 12-step work, got a sponsor, all that stuff, and I got sober. So that's how I processed that initial wartime stuff was, hey, I'm medicated, and that, did not work on the personal side for me. And eventually it would have caught up to me in the military. I'd have been drunk on duty. I would have, and then, but I got sober in 92. And then I was in special forces from 96 to 2001, all sober, and that was pre 9/11. So I was just deploying to Central and South America, mainly teaching and those kind of things. But I was getting, a lot of repetitions under my belt and a lot of good training on, hey, how to deploy, how to come back, how to stay sober, working on all my emotional skills, process, and all of that stuff. And then, and then from 2001 until 2011 was whenever I was out at Delta, out at the unit. And I ended up doing 12 deployments, 40 months total time in combat. So then I have that experience, and so to your question of that, I tried coming home and self-medicating, and that didn't work. So I got sober, obviously a very long story in that, but a short version. And then was in sober and then was in combat again and came back. And in 2006 was whenever I received the traumatic brain injury that I didn't know. I mean, everyone that I had known had been blown up in some sort of way, so it was like, okay, well, but I started noticing, my cognitive abilities slipping at time, nothing that affected the job, but just little things that would come up, like it'd be a little bit more emotional. And then I was involved in like 3 mass casualty events, so doing a lot of medic work that I highly trained as a medic, but I was operator. I wasn't a medic. So it affected me greatly. And so it started getting harder. We had a lot of loss during the time that I was in, especially from 2002 to, 2010, there was a lot of loss. There was a lot of combat, that went on there, specifically where I was working, lost a lot of friends, a lot get injured. And so I started struggling a little bit more where huge family guy, right? My wife that I mentioned that we were separated, we ended up getting back together. We've been together now for 33 years. I have two boys that aren't boys anymore. They're 23 and 20. But during this whole time, my family, I was very solid in my sobriety, very solid in who I am and what I stand for, but what ended up happening was because I wasn't thinking straight and the accumulative effect of all those, we'll call them traumatic events, significant emotional events that weren't get processed, it started affecting my family life, where kind of the mission of the military was now creeping above my family. And I realized it, but I just really didn't know, how to stop it till the end. So I had a lot of struggles, but me and my wife have wonderful communication. And then, where it really changed for me was when my run was kind of done, when I had 19 years in, and I had to decide if I was going to stay in, or go ahead and retire. And so I said, yeah, I'll go ahead and retire. But then that's whenever they started doing all the medical testing, all the brain testing. They're like, wow, man, you're like really screwed up.
Was that the official diagnosis, Tom?
Yeah, it was like official where they're like, no more jumping, no more around explosives, no more, because I couldn't take another head trauma.
Right.
So it was, but yeah, it was kind of not so much official words, but when they got the test results back, because, where I come from and who I work with, we're pretty tough, we're pretty good problem solvers, we don't ever quit. We just try to figure it out, keep going, mission, all in a wonderful way. So that's one of the things whenever, and you've experienced this too, the hardest thing to do is to ask, for help, so especially with, this is what I always say is like, a lot of people say, hey, brother, if you need me, just let me know, or if in the military it's the command, it's like, hey, if you need a break, just let me know. And it's like all the selections that I've been to and guys like me have been to, you go to those selection things and they produce a profile and they produce a results. If you can pass all these things, then that means you're this type of a person and you think this way and you act this way. Well, the first two main things that guarantees is that number one, I won't quit, right? And then number two is I'll never ask for help, right? so that's the kind of person that is needed to do those particular jobs.
Sure.
So then you see how it's counterintuitive to say, hey, if you need a break, let me know.
And you're definitely, you're put together in a way to be strong, like you said, and push forward, and not in these words, but just get over it or throw it back there.
Yeah.
And our brains don't like when we just throw it back there.
Yeah. It's like a warehouse, right?
Sure.
I mean, you can throw it back there for a while, but eventually like it's going to start spilling out, and that's what ended up happening. The thing with me is that, like, back to your question of the struggles, the biggest struggle that I had was, there was a lot going on. I was deciding to get out. I knew I had some work to do. I was still, active in meetings, sponsoring guys, having a sponsor. Down the checklist, crushing it. I love it. But man, I was still going down, mentally and emotionally. And so it wasn't like, I decided. So what was jamming me up was, it's like, hey, how do I go from the guy that's helping everybody to now I'm the guy that needs help? Right. And I didn't mean that from an ego way, but meaning from a complex problem solving. It's like, hey, what happened? Like, I have a great lifestyle. My behavior is good. I'm a family guy. You know what I mean? It's not like I was doing anything behind the scenes. And, but the deal was I had untreated, undiagnosed traumatic brain injury and then all the PTS. So it was only another one of my best friends who was also in the military, a warrior, and he just always constantly stayed on me. He's like, hey man, you're screwed up. You need to get help. I'm like, everybody I know is like me. And he's like, well, you're all screwed up. It's just like, like
Right.
you're not screwed up, but you need some training, man. Like you got like, hey, there's stuff that we can do. And he was speaking from experience because he got in 2005, he got clipped in the head with a bullet, so it didn't penetrate the brain, but he had to go through all this TBI stuff when it wasn't really known much about it. So he knew what tests I should get. And, and I was still going downhill. And finally it was like, okay, man, I'll go get the test, and then all the results came back. And then back to your question of that was one of the hardest things to me. And a lot of times what I've seen in others and 100% for sure that was going on with me is I was really thinking I wasn't the problem, that you were,
right.
And that was, and I was sober. So it wasn't, and I had a lot of tools and I was like, man, why are y'all being this way? And then I remember having a conversation with my wife, and I was like, I just looked at her because it was still just so rough. And I was like, it's me, isn't it? And she's like, yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang it. So I ended up, once I committed myself to my recovery the same way I committed myself to the military. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, that run was over for me. Like what treatment? So, I ended up spending 3 months, in cognitive therapy at the TBI clinic on Fort Bragg, so I was doing cognitive therapy, vestibular therapy, psychological therapy. And for me, I even had to get on like a light dose of Zoloft for about 8 months, because I had a chemical imbalance going on. I had a lot of unprocessed trauma, and I had a brain that wasn't really working that great. And it was a crusher for about 4 months, hitting all my appointments. And then adding the recovery piece to it, meaning, for me, it's AA and everything that I do with that. But I just had dedicated myself, it's like, hey, why am I doing this? And I always have had two reasons, that's my family. And then the other one is for the guys like me that are still suffering. It's like, dang, man, I just love that aspect of what we do, what we're doing now and what we do on a nightly basis at my kitchen, and what we do at Warrior's Heart is our lifestyle of like, hey, how do I continue to stay sober and then help others to achieve it? That's really my jam, man. It's obviously I'm into it, right? And but I do, man. And it gives me this wonderful life that I could have never dreamed of. Yeah, there's tragedies. Yeah, I still struggle a lot, on a lot of days, but I have purpose, and I have, I'm grateful, and as that's a key thing is gratitude and purpose, because when I get up in the morning, if I don't know why I'm getting up, then, it's not going to be that great,
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. I had spoken at a high school class, and a young lady had asked me near the end of me sharing my story with them, why do you say you're a grateful alcoholic? I said, because I completely lacked purpose prior to getting sober. Yeah. I wasn't the best dad. I was a terrible husband, went through the divorce and everything else. And I'm like, it's given me the chance to actually build a person that is of service. And for that, I'm grateful. Because, hey, that's why we say one day at a time. People are like, what does that mean? Well, I know I got today because I woke up. I don't know what tomorrow brings. So,
oh, yeah. And that's, you know what I mean? And like you said, that just being the lifestyle. And that's what, when we talk about it in recovery, you know what I mean, and struggles, but it applies, principally it applies to everyone. Like, hey, when I get up, my feet hit the ground in the morning, like, hey, what is my purpose? At least a general direction of it going. And like you said, that's why I'm so grateful because I have one. I've adopted one. I've chosen one that no matter how bad I screw up in my life, which I've made some horrible screw ups in sobriety, horrible. And those really suck because you can't say, well, I was drunk. There's no excuse. I made a conscious decision to do the wrong thing and followed through on it. Like, damn, that's that's a learner. That's a statement.
Right.
I don't know if you've experienced, but I have. But at the end of the day, knowing that, hey, I have a purpose, and my purpose, is to stay sober, and to help others to achieve that, and that's a lifelong effort, and there's no short of humans that are in need of that. And I just love it.
I always joke with people that I think everyone could use it going through the 12 steps, like having a sponsor. It would be good for everybody, regardless, you don't have an addiction issue. God bless you. Thank goodness you don't. But I think it would help everyone.
It would. I'm 100% agree. It's like, I don't know, call it a life coach, whatever you want to call it. It's like, I 100% agree with you, man. I mean, that's the vehicle. For me, that's my vehicle through life, is the 12 steps. I mean, I still see psychologists when I need it. I still see my neuro psychs when I need, all the different specialties, but my vehicle, what keeps me on track and on purpose, is practicing to the best of my ability, which is failure on some days, is practicing the, 10, 11, and 12 for me. And, yeah, man, and somehow, some way, none of my business. My business is just do the work. I'm not responsible for outcomes. I'm responsible for, like you said, that one day at a time. Like, man, get up, give it the best that I can, and then I love it, man. I'll start super geeking out and getting all passionate and start.
Go for it. I love it. Yeah, thank you, Bill and Bob. You guys knew some stuff. Thanks for putting it in a book for us.
Yeah.
Tom, I know for, my friends and family member that went into the service and going through basic training, something I've always wanted to ask someone that has gone through, the disease of addiction and found recovery. But do you think there should be a better approach when the, young men and women enter the military to kind of do a little more on wiping away some of the alcohol culture? I know for me, I went and visited one of my cousins when he was in the Air Force, when you could still just be a general person and get on a military base. And it was like a frat house on the weekend, you know? And so it kind of built that culture. And, so many of my friends, whether they saw combat or not, or there was, any sort of trauma, they still seem to kind of carry that even when they went back to civilian life, of that alcohol culture or other drugs for that matter.
Right. I think it's, again, back to that profession, that class, whether it's people in the military, cops, firefighters, there's a big part of alcohol that is part of that culture. And I'm not the alcohol police. I know you're not either. We won't stand for it as alcoholic. You know what I mean? It's like anti. But that's where, to me, and I always say that when I'm talking to military folks or anybody in the population, where it's like, where it's like, they could. And to be honest with you, because I've been around that culture since 1990, it has shifted a lot. As far as what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, they've moved the needle a lot compared to what it was, as far as overall. But that, that's kind of where it comes down to. It was where, man, it'll always be, a big part of that culture. And a lot of folks that join the military, and those different services, they kind of come from that kind of background already. So it's kind of like pretty loaded and it's kind of accepted as long as it's not interfering with your job. And it's always I think your question was, should that be curbed or not?
Yeah, or at least maybe some sort of awareness to, the young individuals as they enter the military. Because like you said, you hit a great point. There's so many that are entering the military, much like you did, that it was, this is my way out. Okay, this is where I can find purpose, literally be a service man or woman. But they do come from some of these trauma backgrounds, be it within the home, neighborhoods, so much of our country is dilapidated, urban neighborhoods where, there's already, I know one buddy I can think of, he was like, well, my friends have already been shot. At least now I'll have a job in insurance and healthcare, so he went to military route. It, like, for him, that was literally his mindset.
For a lot of folks, it's the out. And then whenever it comes time to the, and I'm just speaking mainly I'll speak in my own experience, right? Which is what they call combat arms, folks that are, doing the fighting and everything. And the conversation usually comes up about, like, hey, they prepare you for war, but they don't prepare you for outside of the war. Right. And that's true. And I agree with that, because I know how hard. So here's the deal with our military, and specifically our combat arms. And, and that is that it is designed to do one thing, and that is to kill the enemies of our country.
Yeah.
That's what being an infantryman is like, an artilleryman, a tanker, like the guys that are that's, make no mistake, like that's your job description. So to prepare a human being to basically go against humanity, my personal belief is humans aren't supposed to hurt other humans. I really believe that. However, we live in this world, and we know that there's a need for someone to stop human beings from hurting other human beings. So it's that piece of it. So it takes everything that the military does just to prepare them for that piece. In an ideal world, whenever it's post-military, hey, you didn't get any training on how to live in the outside world. So that's where the VA, Veterans Affairs, is going to take over, in theory, right? And you'll never hear me bad-mouthing the VA, because there's incredible humans that work in the VAs.
Absolutely.
But the system itself is completely overwhelmed with the last 20 years or more. And then we still have our Vietnam veterans that are still in there. So, but that's how it's kind of supposed to be. People will get on a tangent on like, well, the military trains them to do all this stuff, and then they just send them out. And it's like, well, yeah, but the VA is overwhelmed and not covering down. That's why Warrior's Heart came into existence.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, like, we weren't trying to a better widget or try to, make something kind of smoke and mirrors a little bit better. It's like, hey, there's a gap here. It's like the veteran suicide rate is 22 a day. Like if what we were doing was working, then that wouldn't be happening. Simple problem solving, right? And so what we found out is that the majority of the people that do end up committing suicide, taking their own life, a huge percentage of them, I won't say all because I don't know for sure, but a huge percentage were under the influence of something when they did the final act, and most of the folks that doing it, it's not a cry for help or anything like that. Like, they just do it, right? So you can't really get in front of that. And but if we address the self-medication aspects of it, then ideally we don't get to that spot where they're medicated and take their own lives. That's why with Warrior's Heart, that's one of the big things that we do, because usually in this population, they silo everything off. Like, hey, you go here for your chemical dependency, right? Don't talk anything about that war stuff and PTS. Like, so we'll talk about your chemical dependency piece. And then if you go to PTS therapy or something, they're like, well, don't bring that chemical stuff up. We're focusing on mental behavior. It's like, come on, man. Like, we're one person. It's like,
yeah.
It's back to the chicken or the egg. Is it the drinking and drugging that's bringing up the unprocessed trauma and emotions? Or is it the unprocessed trauma that forces the drinking? It's like, who cares? Treat them both. So that's what we do at Warrior's Heart. They have a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and they have, behavioral health / trauma counselor. So we hit at both aspects because we have to. There's no, like, we have to deal, the tools with the chemical dependency. We know it's all connected. So that's one of the things that makes it different. And again, that just comes from our own personal experiences.
Sure.
it's holistic, meaning like we're a whole person. That's why we hit it hard on the therapies, we hit it hard on the groups, and that's also why we have a wood shop and a metal shop and an art shop. You know what I mean? And extra gym time. You know what I mean? For this population, it's like you have to be able to decompress and to process and to create. We spend so much time destroying and breaking things, even as our profession. Not to mention the family stuff and everything like that. It's like, how do I create? And we all know the healing properties that occur from artistic work and working with your hands, and and just getting all of that out. So it's
music, whatever it is.
There's, with all this stuff that goes on in the world, man, we just don't spend enough time of how many awesome people are in the world. You know what I mean? That are really trying to, like, no kidding, help out other human beings, not with some program and, you know what I mean? But I mean, like a human being, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what, do you want a cup of coffee? Like, let's just have a human conversation, I
have a lot of hope that it's funny, Tom. I don't know about you. Once we kind of started getting back to, some more normalcy, whatever normalcy is. And I'm hopeful that I'm seeing a shift in people towards the last couple of years has taught us a lot about being more kind, not just to others, but to ourselves as well. Because you and I know the better we are to ourselves, as far as what we say to ourselves and how we treat ourselves, it spills out into the rest of the world.
Completely. And on that point, man, that was another learned skill for me. Because before, if you would have said to me, like, hey, Tom, you need to take care of yourself, you need to be kind to yourself, I would immediately think, man, that's selfish and self-centered. I need to be working with helping others and doing that kind of stuff. But it's like you said, it's that combo. But I didn't know crap whenever, I started this whole process years ago, and I had to really be taught this, like what you just said, the only way that I can be kind to others and really make a difference is if I'm being kind to myself. They kind of work hand in hand, and that's how I'm a team guy, right? I don't mind letting myself down, but I refuse to let you down, right? That's just was always my mindset. So I use that same mindset to trick myself into taking care of myself, because I know that, like, hey, Teddy or Jimmy or Fred, like, hey, those guys are going to be calling me tomorrow. We got step work to do, whatever. I'm like, dang, I got to get on my game. You know what I mean? If I've been slacking, I'm like, man, like, if I'm not taking care of myself, then I won't be here for these guys that need me. And I don't like letting the team down. So that's, to me, like, for my wiring, being of a service minded, it's not natural for me to take care of myself. So I really have to put forth a lot of effort of self-care, like you said, and being kind. And that's a whole lifestyle, those two words. Like, just be kind, man. You don't have to jump tall buildings with a single bound and, like, give this money and change the world. Like, just be nice to somebody, man. Like, I don't know, don't be mean.
We like to say in one of my groups, hey, don't be a dick today.
Exactly. That's all.
That's all. It's simple. I know it's tough. We all get in our emotions. But hey, speaking of team, how did you meet John and Lisa Lannon that helped you start Warrior's Heart?
Oh my gosh, man. It all comes back to, for me, it's all higher power and God thing. So how I met Josh Lannon was in 2013. I was obviously still active in recovery, but that was just me and my guys and local and everything. And I was working on a training company at the time. I was teaching law enforcement, and then we'd have these fun and guns where that's what I called them. But it was a training event, very hard, very it was a really good event. And so we ran a 3-day one for the YPO Network, Young Presidents Organization. And it was about 10 guys that showed up for a 2.5-day event, super tough. And so I met Josh in the woods in Hoffman, North Carolina, just out of Camp McCall. He came there to get some military training. I was putting on the training because I had to pay the freaking bills. You know what I mean? We met there. He had him and his wife Lisa had run 6 other treatment facilities, you know, in Utah and Arizona. And they wanted their next one to be a veteran healing center. And we met and we did a Warriors experience and story time. And then we had the conversation of like, hey man, do we want to do this together? And I'm like, hell yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, yeah. So we're perfect partners because what I bring to the table, they don't bring to the table, and what they bring to the table, I don't. Right. And, so that's what makes for perfect partners is I can do what you can't and you can do what I can't. Therefore, we are both very necessary to one another. Right. And that's how we met, you know, and that's how we've operated, you know, since, man. And it's just really, really cool.
How many folks do you have a rough number? How many people do you think you've serviced to date?
We're right at 1,700 to date. And like currently, you know, we have right around 50 in-house right now, you know, sitting there, you know, in the training program, you know, I mean, getting that piece. We've got right at 20 that are in our sober living because we have intensive outpatient, we have sober living, and we have inpatient, you know, and so we're actively involved, you know, in that fight every 7 days a week, 24/7, you know, and as far as you coming out there, you let me know when. Because like talking about it is one thing, but actually when you set foot on the property and then you sit in the, you know, in the lunchroom, you know, with 40 other folks in there, and then we go to the metal shop and hang out by the lake. I mean, you can just, yeah, you let me know when you want to come and we'll be ready.
All right. I'm all about it. If people want to know more about Warrior's Heart, Tom, how can they do so?
The best way to do it is just go to warriorsheart.com. That's the most simplest, easiest. There's phone number there. You can reach out via text. You can reach out via email because some folks don't want to get on the phone. So every avenue that you would like to approach it and to find out more about it and what the programs are like, I would say the best way to do it is when warriorsheart.com, you see that number, call it, and you'll talk to an admission advocate. And they will immediately start advocating and answering any questions that you have. Like, don't try to figure it out on your own. Like, just call, you know, they'll
have a conversation, huh?
That's it. Just have a conversation. That's all.
I know that there's donations that come in, but how do you guys go about fundraising? Maybe if somebody wants to donate as well, is that available there at warriorsheart.com?
Whenever you'll go to, that's a separate entity, and it's Warriors Heart Foundation.
So the foundation supplements helps part of that
when necessary. Yep.
Awesome. Is there any other outreach, maybe external of like that Warriors Heart Foundation does within communities that aren't just at the location?
Yeah, the Warriors Heart Foundation piece also helps to fund service dogs because we also have a canine program at Warriors Heart. That's another elective that we have. We also involve in local law enforcement, the San Antonio Police Department. So it's really, really, really involved in the community also.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Tom, I think it's time for some fun random questions. What do you say?
Okay.
All right. Tell us one thing people would be surprised to learn about you, be it a hobby or whatever it could be.
This is the one that I found that surprises people the most. I don't really know why, but it's like I love reading sci-fi fantasy, you know, Lord of the Rings type, dark elves, you know, trolls, mages, wizards, warlords. That's what I read at night to unplug, and like that's part of my routine of going to bed. And
I dig it.
Yeah, so most people don't know that, and the ones are pretty surprised.
Hey, Tom, it's okay. I build Legos. So that was one of my first sponsors. What did you love to do as a kid? The first thing I said was Legos. It got me a gift card. So now I've got 2 bookshelves of Star Wars Legos and race cars.
I love the other thing, just real quick, is kind of funny too, is I love playing video games.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Are we a classic video game, or is it, newest system, or what?
I would say that I like the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like the interactive online, you know what I mean, where you're going against and everything. Yeah. It's another complete unplug for me, man. And it's fun. And I've always been a video game guy throughout, enjoyed it. And I still continue with that.
Is that just fun to get on with the buddies and talk crap and everything else?
Oh yeah.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flying, man.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The closest that I got to it in real life was, free falling, sure. Which is, is a bit of flying, but, and I'm really into freedom and, so it's, I'd fly, man.
What was your highest jump?
26,000 feet.
Wow.
Yeah. That's right at 2 minutes. You're falling to the earth and flying for right at 2 minutes.
That gives me the chill because I've always wanted to skydive and yet I'm afraid of heights, but everyone says, it's totally different. I'm like, okay.
I don't know. I mean, that one, like 26,000 is like oxygen and everything.
Right.
And all that, right? But the normal ones, normally it would be between 10 and 11,000. And yeah, man, I loved it. Like I still love it, but I had to stop doing it just because, again, I can't justify, another, getting jacked in the head again. You know what I mean?
Right. So what is it that they call that when you have to use oxygen for the jump? There's a term, like helo jump, or
they call it it's halo is high altitude, low opening. So it's free fall. So it could be anywhere from, 3,000 feet up to, 26,000 or even a little bit more feet. But that's high altitude is where you jump from. And then you have a low opening. So you open it. They also have what's called a hey-ho, which is high altitude, high opening. So if you were to jump out at 25,000 feet and then you opened up your parachute at 24,000 feet, and then you basically fly that canopy, for miles and miles and miles. So those are just 2 different techniques with that.
Well, I might just have to hit you up there on social media just so we can talk. Like I said, I'm so fascinated with military training and technology. This is one that I always enjoy. If you could have dinner with any one person, living or not, who would it be? The first one that comes to mind is Denzel Washington. Really? Why is that?
Love him as an actor. I just the movies that he's been in, how he acts. Never met him before in my life, you know what I mean? But that was that would be super interesting. And then just all the stuff that I've seen, like in different interviews and when he spoke at colleges and how he's helped out with really on the quiet end with a lot of military stuff too, and military families and so that would be it.
Yeah, it seems like such a fascinating man. I agree with you there. Okay, being that your story is definitely interesting, if there was a movie made about your life, who would you want to play you in the movie?
Chris Hemsworth. Is that his name? That was who was Thor, right? And
yep.
Yeah. And he's been in Extraction, different movies. Yeah, I would say that'd probably be close.
I dig it. That's perfect. All right, Tom.
We've never been asked that question before. That
awesome. Well, now you can share it to Mrs. Hey, this goofy guy in California asked who should play me if a movie was made about my wife. How about this? Who would you have play your wife? That's an interesting one.
Wow. We'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. You got to ask her approval on that one first.
Because we'll keep it neutral right now.
That's the same answer I would give and say, let me ask a girlfriend what she says. Tom, if you can leave just anyone, any kind of advice, people that are struggling, no matter who it is, or military personnel, former EMT, whatever, just.
Man, the number one thing is you're not alone. That, to me, a lot of that's because of my personal experience, because I thought I was alone. I didn't think anyone was suffering as much as I was. I didn't think anyone was damaged as I was. I didn't, all of those things, is that I really didn't think anyone could help me at different parts of my life. And so that was the biggest message. It's kind of sounds cliche, but it's not. I mean it with all my heart. Like, it's really know that you're not alone. And then whether you're the person that's struggling or the family member, like I said, just create momentum, reach out, you know what I mean, to whatever the ailment is and whatever's going on, because back to what we were saying, there's a lot of really good, hardworking human beings that just want to help folks like us, that just want to do better. They're there, but a lot of times we may have to fight for it. You may have to fight for it. You may have to really look for it, but just don't give up, and know that you're not alone. Like, stay in the fight and just keep pushing a little bit more.
Mr. Spooner, thank you. This has been a real honor and a privilege.
Same here, Jason, and I'll be happy to come back anytime and you'd like me, because we just basically scratched the surface, and I'm looking forward to seeing you out at Warriors Heart.
I sure hope so. I need a vacation in Texas is what I got on the list.
Win-win.